You know that voice in your head? The one that won't shut up. Whether it's reminding you of a mistake you made 5 minutes ago or 5 years ago, you're not alone. But what if that voice could be trained, guided, or even transformed from harsh critic to trusted coach? In this episode of Mind the Gap, we explore the science of inner dialogue, the ancient wisdom of the Stoics, and the surprisingly simple techniques that can help you reclaim control of your mental narrative. From psychological distance to the quiet power of awe, this is a conversation about how to lead yourself better from the inside out. Here's Michael.
You know that voice in your head, the one that seems to narrate your life. It's there when you forget your keys. It's there when you're lying awake at 3 a.m, replaying a conversation you had earlier that day, or maybe even 10 years ago. Sometimes it's helpful. Sometimes it's harsh. And sometimes it can feel like your worst enemy. But what if I told you that you could train that voice? That you could shift it from critic to coach? Not by silencing it, but by changing how it speaks to you. Today, I want to explore that idea because this voice, your inner dialogue, is more powerful than you might think. And there's a growing body of science, psychology, and even ancient philosophy that can help to manage it better. So let's start with a simple question. Do you talk to yourself? Of course you do. We all do. The research tells us that we spend a staggering amount of time, nearly 1/3 of our waking hours, engaged in silent, internal conversations. That's what Ethan Kross, a professor of psychology at the University of Michigan, has found in his work. Kross is one of the leading voices on this subject, and he describes our inner dialogue as a kind of running commentary, sometimes useful, sometimes unhelpful, and often unconscious. Some of this chattering is practical. Rehearsing your to-do list, preparing for a meeting, talking yourself into action. But there's another one, another kind of self-talk. It's the one that keeps you looping back over old mistakes or predicting failure before you've even begun. That's what Kross calls chatter. And when it takes over, it can harm relationships, interrupt sleep, and even prolong stress in the body. Chronic chatter, according to his research, is linked to inflammation, cardiovascular strain, and anxiety. So we're not just talking about an annoying habit here. We're talking about a voice that can shape your mental and physical health. So what can you do? Well, let's start with something incredibly simple. It's a technique called distance self-talk. And you can try it right now. Instead of thinking, I can't believe I messed that up again, try something like, okay, Michael, this has happened before. You know how to handle it. Let's figure out the next step. What you've done is shift from first person, I, to second person, you. Or you can use your own name. It might feel odd at first, but the neuroscience is clear. This kind of language creates a psychological distance that allows your brain to step out of reactivity and into reasoning. In brain scans, people who use distant self-talk show more activity in the prefrontal cortex, the planning and problem-solving center, and less in the amygdala, that part of the brain that triggers fight or flight. So you're not silencing that inner voice. You're giving it a different job. You're turning the critic into a coach. And here's the thing. This idea isn't new. Stoics got there long before us, thousands of years ago. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher, wrote his personal reflections in a journal that he never intended anyone else to read. It's now known as the Meditations, and it's full of self-talk. Not in the modern motivational sense, but in a calm, reasoning, reflective tone. One of his most famous lines is, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you'll find strength." That's not just philosophy. That's emotional regulation. The Stoics believed that we're not disturbed by events, but by our interpretations of those events. That we must learn to observe our thoughts without becoming them. Seneca, another Stoic, put it this way: we're often more frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than reality. Sound familiar? Well, that's the inner voice pulling you into the worst case scenario, into shame, regret, or panic. But the Stoics didn't tell us to ignore those feelings. They told us to reason with them, to step back, to ask, is this useful or is this true? In other words, they were encouraging us to do what we now call self-distancing. This brings us into the territory of emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman, whose name you'll know if you've studied leadership or personal development, defines emotional intelligence as including 5 key domains: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. Our inner voice lives in the first 2. How aware we are of our emotional patterns and how skillfully we can manage them. Think about the difference between reacting and responding. When you're in a reactive state, your inner voice is usually loud and critical. But when you pause, even briefly, and choose how to respond, you're practicing emotional intelligence. You're noticing the story your mind is telling you and deciding whether to rewrite it or not. This matters in leadership. It matters in relationships, and it matters in how we treat ourselves. Because if our inner voice is harsh, rushed, or fearful, it doesn't just stay inside our head. It spills out into our tone, our body language, and even our decisions. As a coach, I've seen this play out in countless sessions. Someone will come in thinking the issue is external, the team, the deadline, the conflict. But after a little exploration, we land on something internal. I'm not good enough. They don't respect me. I'm failing, and everyone can see it. And I'll ask a question like, whose voice is that really? Sometimes it's a parent's voice. Sometimes a teacher. Sometimes it's their own, shaped over years of criticism or perfectionism. That question, whose voice is this, can be a turning point, because it invites us to take ownership, to ask, do I want to keep listening to this, or do I want to change the script? Another useful coaching question is, what would you say to a friend in that situation? Because we're often far more compassionate, encouraging, and realistic when talking to others than we are to ourselves. What's the whole point of distant self-talk? Well, it's to bring that external perspective in. Now, you might think that talking to someone else about your thoughts is always helpful, but here's a nuance that Ethan Kross points out. It depends who you talk to. Some people with the best of intentions are simply going to let you vent. And that can feel good in the moment, but doesn't necessarily help you move forward. You might walk away thinking, well, that was kind of them to listen, but I still feel stuck. The most helpful people are those who can listen with empathy and help you broaden your perspective. They're not caught up in your emotions, so they can offer clarity. Kross calls them chatter advisors, people who don't just soothe you, but help you reframe. So when you're choosing someone to talk about something you're struggling with, ask yourself, will this person listen and advise, or just absorb? Both have their place. But when you're dealing with your inner chatter, look for the people who lift you up and widen your views. And then there's awe. It might sound like a big leap, but bear with me for a moment. Awe, the emotion we feel when we encounter something vast and beyond our understanding, like the night sky, the ocean, a beautiful piece of music. Well, awe has a strange power. according to Kross, awe reduces the size of the self. We feel smaller, not in a diminished way, but in a connected way. And when the self shrinks, so does the chatter. Think about that for a moment. When you're caught up in your thoughts, your worries, your identity, everything feels tight, closed, and urgent. But when you look up at a starry sky, or listen to a choir in full harmony, or stand before a mountain, something shifts. You get perspectives. You remember that you're part of something much larger. And in that moment, the inner voice quietens. Not because you forced it to, but because it doesn't seem so necessary. This isn't about escape. It's about proportion. So let's bring this together. You can't eliminate the voice in your head, and you shouldn't try to. It's part of you. It helps you plan, prepare, process. But you can change how it speaks. You can teach it to be more like a coach and less of a critic. You can create distance by changing your language. You can lean on people who help you reframe. And you can step into the awe to get perspective. And you can draw from ancient philosophy and modern science to do all of this with intention. That, I believe, is one of the most powerful acts of self-leadership. So, the next time that familiar voice pops up, pause. Try using your own name internally. Talk to yourself like someone you care about. Step back. Breathe. Look up. Remind yourself, you're not your thoughts. You are the one hearing them. And that means you have a choice. Not silence, but sovereignty. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep minding the gap.
That's it for this episode of Mind the Gap. If something in today's conversation gave you pause, offered perspective, or helped quiet that inner critic, carry it with you. And maybe share it with someone who could use the same. You can support the show by following Mind the Gap on your favourite podcast platform, leaving a rating or review, or tagging us on social media with your thoughts. Until next time, keep the voice kind, the mind steady, keep minding the gap.